What's up everyone, Jay here. We're gonna talk about the state of affairs right now when it comes to computer stuff. I don't really do hardware news videos, so it's not really a news video because of the fact that this has already been talked about and discussed. I just wanted to kind of give you my 2 cents, no pun intended, about some of the things that's happening right now in the PC industry that's actually quite bad. It's therapeutic for me to just on you guys the things that are in my head. Okay, it's a scary place. I know, my head, not the state of affairs, although that's scary too. Okay, whatever, just roll the ad.
We interrupt this video to bring you a special message from iFixit. No, we interrupt this interruption with this interruption about new stuff from iFixit. Wish you had a new graphics card, but inventory sucks? Fix the inventory problems with iFixit. Whoa, don't drop it. Can't fix that with iFixit. Just kidding, yes you can. Wish you could take iFixit with you anywhere, but your pockets aren't big enough? Introducing the new More.
And the new Minnow.
Take them with you anywhere. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below for discounts and savings and explosions. More explosions. Even more explosions. Why are you still here? Click the description now.
All right, so we're gonna talk about this in a couple of different pain points here. Let's start currently with the AMD deciding that they're not going to try and compete with high-end on GPUs. Now sure, the high-end market, first of all, let's kind of define high-end. I think everyone's opinion of high-end is a little different. I've seen people even say RTX 4060 is high-end. It's like, but there's nothing below that of the current generation. So where do you define end, right? So we have to stick within a current generation of product. So I would say something like a 4070 Ti and above would be considered high-end, because you're approaching what, $700 a graphics card at that point, which used to be the highest end graphics card. So as you can see, over the last 10 years, we have seen the nominal price of what the highest graphics card costs double, which is well beyond the rate of inflation. Okay, in the last 10 years, things have not doubled in cost. They've gotten close, but GPUs have for sure gone way above the normal inflation rate, mostly because it's a commodity. And for most people, they don't need an RTX 4090 or 4080 or anything like that because of the fact that they are commodities. You can get by with a lower end graphics card, it's just you want more power. And AMD knows that. They know that the main majority of people buying graphics cards are shopping in that 4060, maybe 4070 price point, not 4080, 4090, which is $1,000 and $1,600 respectively. So I have to assume there's a couple of reasons why this is. One, the 7900 XTX is now 2 years old. We were hoping something might have come out between then and now to truly give the RTX 4090 a run for its money, because competition is what drives price drop. You can't have price battles in the consumer favor happen if there's no competition happening. You get one brand, which in this instance is NVIDIA, that gets to just control the market and set the price where there is no competition. So that's why there's such a big gap between the 4080 Super and the 4090. Because remember, when the 4080 came out prior to the Super, the 7900 XTX was like outpacing it slightly in some tests, and then you turn on RT and then the 4080 would pass it because of the 3rd gen RT cores that you find in the NVIDIA card versus 2nd gen RT cores found in the AMD card. So once the 4080 Super came out at $200 less than the 4080, so $1,000, you're now talking about 7900 XTX cards that are more expensive at that time than the 4080 and slower in a lot of tasks and didn't have things like DLSS. Sure, it had FSR 2.0, but we know that's not as good as DLSS in terms of its sharpness and fidelity. So it became a point to where if you look at the market share for NVIDIA versus AMD, NVIDIA has like 87% of the market share. That is all cards. Not just the high end. If we looked at the high end cards, if we were able to basically deduce that information or deduct it down to just, let's say, 4080 and up and 7900 XT and XTX and up, I think that number would be even higher in NVIDIA's favor. So that doesn't give NVIDIA any incentive to reduce costs. I mean, as gamers, sure, we all want 4090 performance at the cost of a taco. Okay, it's never gonna happen because it costs money to make that. Now, does it cost $1,600? Absolutely not. But when there's no competition, by saying no competition, I don't even mean the fact that there's nothing that exists there for 4090, sure, but even 4080, if you are dominating the market share, what incentive do you have to reduce price? Because of the fact that you are just controlling the sales. So that is the terrible state of affairs for PC. Number one is we need competition. I do think it's going to get even worse because we know 50 series is around the corner. We know that. Initial rumors and even some off the record conversations I've had have said Q4 of this year. Now we're still in that, is it getting pushed back to Q1 of next year, which seems very, very plausible. Because again, what reason do you have to rush the launch of a 50 series card if you are still selling 40 series cards hand over fist? We had the same conversation when 30 series was the newest, or not the newest, but the current gen and 40 series coming, right? We had this same conversation 2 years ago, exactly word for word. The difference is we don't have scalping happening right now. We had 30 series cards that were still selling for nearly double the price of what their MSRPs and e-tail costs are. So the different factor now is the fact that we don't have scalpers that are inflating cost, which would mean getting 40 series out as fast as possible to have more cards in the market to try and control pricing and bring it back down to normal. But what did we report on 2 years ago that we knew was an indicator that something new was coming? It was the slow disappearance of current models. Some of the latest news has stated that October is the month that e-tailers, retailers, board partners will no longer be receiving 4080, 4090 dies because of preparation for the new card. So at some point you have to flip it to the new thing, right? And TSMC is the manufacturer for NVIDIA graphics cards. So at some point TSMC has to change the tooling over to the new thing. There will probably is some overlap. They've probably already been manufacturing 50 series for a little while. But at some point, you've got to turn all production over to the new gen. So I think that's already been happening. And the reason for that is if I start looking at RTX 4080 cards on, say, Micro Center, Amazon, Newegg, even Best Buy, they're plentiful. You can find 4080s, 4080 Supers all day long. If you look for 4090s, it becomes very slim. Just a few months ago, if I looked for RTX 4090 at even say Micro Center, I would find 5 or 6 SKUs that say 25 or more in stock at Tustin, California, which is our local Micro Center store. If I look at Micro Center today at the Tustin store, there are 2 SKUs available. One of them, which is a PNY, Verdo Epic X, has 1 in stock, and that's close to an MSRP card. It's $17.89, so it's still above MSRP. The Founders is $15.99. And you have 11 of the Gigabyte NVIDIA GeForce Gaming RGB Overclock Triple Fan, which is kind of like their basic card. That's at $17.99. Nothing else available, period, at Micro Center. I did this about, I think it was June or July, and I'm not kidding. There were 5 or 6 different versions, including Strix, Tough, MSI Aero, MSI Gaming X Trio, all of those cards with 25 or more in stock, like 25 plus. I was like, dude, that's crazy. Because in my mind, I was like, people aren't buying this. That's awesome because $2,200 graphics cards, even $1,600 graphics cards are asinine as far as I'm concerned. Like the price is ridiculous. But seeing them be less now available tells me they're not receiving inventory nearly as much. And this is true for any of the Micro Center stores. Let's look at Newegg. So that same Gigabyte GeForce RTX 4090 is $2,199 at NVIDIA, or not NVIDIA, but Newegg. And I do believe that's because it is a marketplace. So there's other options that are available from $1,849 up to $2,999. Somebody please tell the scalpers that y'all missed the boat by like a year and a half, 2 years maybe. You're not gonna get $3,000 for a 4090. I mean, you're fucking stupid, okay? So Newegg has stuff, but again, they're extremely overpriced because it's third-party marketplace. So we even have the Strix 4090 White Edition for $2,500. Yeah, because paying nearly $1,000 over the cost of a base 4090 or an MSRP 4090 for it to be white and have an Asus logo on it, that makes a whole lot of sense. If I look at Amazon, it's sort of the same story. There are some available, but not nearly as many as the other SKUs. It's a sign that things are starting to prepare for the next generation. So that's a good thing in the sense that right now, probably a good idea to go into a holding pattern and not necessarily buy a 4090 if you were in the market for something that high end. So you're gonna feel real silly if the new 5080 ends up being faster than a 4090 at a cheaper price, theoretically. But that's what I'm concerned with. I'm concerned, is it gonna be a cheaper price or are we going to be seeing $1,250 or $1,299 5080s? Because again, they now know AMD is not planning on competing at that price point. This is basically a repeat of RDNA 1, the 5000 series graphics cards. Remember, the 5700 XT was the highest GPU they made for that generation. Because it was so expensive to manufacture their first RT gen, so it's like when 20 series came out for NVIDIA, that was the first time we saw a $1,200 80 series card, and it sort of stuck ever since. Because according to NVIDIA, it was very expensive to manufacture the RT technology. I don't think that's the case today. I think they've just groomed everyone to accept having money just excavated out of their wallets, and people will buy it as the market share shows. But AMD at this point is, I think, trying to target all of their fab processes now to be in the main buying sphere, if you will, of where buyers tend to shop, and that is that mid-range card. So we're talking like $500, $600 card at the most. Again, crazy that that's considered a mid-range card, considering that's what high-end used to be. So a long-winded way of saying bad for the community, bad for the industry, when someone announces, hey, we're not gonna be doing that. It's important that they announce that, because I still see people, bless their hearts, but we love them to death. If y'all know Reap, then you know what I'm saying. Inside joke there. But moving on, there's a lot of people that still want to say, yeah, but the next AMD high-end graphics card is gonna destroy NVIDIA. We've heard this every gen since ATI was still the brand holder of Radeon graphics cards. The last time AMD truly handed, or even just marginally beat an NVIDIA graphics card was the 7950 versus the 680. That's like 2011. So AMD now announcing that they're not going to be competing for high-end market at all, pulling out of it entirely, at least with the next generation 8000 series or RDNA 3 graphics cards, or 4 graphics cards, excuse me, is letting those people know, stop saying that, because it's not coming. Which unfortunately gives NVIDIA a lot of lead time to just decide how they want to now fuck us. Enough about that topic. Let's move on to the next one. 9000 series CPUs from AMD apparently has had such a poor adoption rate that the last time we saw this abysmal of a launch from AMD in terms of sales was when Bulldozer launched. And we all know how Bulldozer did. Bulldozer, the jokes were constant. They bulldozed their reputation. They bulldozed their performance right into the ground. It was a processor. Okay, I had one. I had an 8120 or 8320 and an 8350. They were trash. They got the job done, but it only appealed to those that absolutely refused to buy Intel. Guess what's repeating itself? It's so ironic because we have 9000 series, which was just a Borderlands movie of a flop of a graphics of a chip. We also have the lowest amount of trust in Intel that we've probably ever seen. It's the reason why if you had invested like $1,000 in Intel back in like 1995 or whatever it was, you'd still have $1,000 in Intel today, because that's how much the stock has tanked. We also have obviously Arrow Lake right around the corner, which is probably going to also have an extremely low adoption rate because, unfortunately, Intel has completely destroyed its reputation ahead of one of its most anticipated launches because of a redesign in the way the architecture is. Bad for business, bad for the industry. So you can see where I'm going with this right now, that PC tech is in an absolute disrepair state of affairs. How do we repair this? Well, for starters, AMD, we'll start with AMD. They're not going to be joining the high-end market with 8000 series. They've already made that known. Hopefully they can do something to rejoin that market in the future. But we're looking at 4 years now, because we're probably going to have at least a 2-year cycle of the next card. And then it's going to take time after that, if they come out with a high-end card, for any sort of market share shift to happen. That'll take a few years. So we're looking at 4 years before we ever see any sort of dynamic shift when it comes to market share. They can also stop overselling their products. By overselling, I mean overhyping. This is something that AMD is unfortunately notorious for. They are notorious for just overhyping the shit out of their stuff. The first indicator should have been when the initial 9000 series were sent out to SIs and like other engineer testers and stuff, and they got pulled back because of a quality issue. Anyone I've talked to so far that says it's complete bullshit, that it was just because of a typo on the IHS, I think I think we know now why performance or whatever wasn't living up to the standard. It is the least amount of improvement we have seen from a Zen architecture process change. Zen 1 was so far ahead of Bulldozer, obviously, as we know. Zen 1.5 was a huge improvement over Zen 1, but still the same architecture. It was like improvements in like the Infinity Fabric and memory speeds and stuff like that, which was huge. Zen 2, which was the 3000 series CPUs, today, still a very, it's still a very appealing chip for people that are not looking to spend a lot of money, but it performs very well. Zen 3, which was 5000 series, probably the best jump we ever saw in terms of IPC, clock speeds, not so much efficiency, they were kind of warm, but in terms of just overall performance and hanging with Intel's 12th gen at the time, was amazing. Like that 5950X today is still like a monster CPU, it really is. Zen 4, which is currently 7000 series, again, probably the biggest jump we've seen generationally from the past, but more cost associated with it. New chipset, DDR5 is a requirement. The chipset motherboards that are required had a higher cost associated with them because they were all first gen of a new process. So there was it was a big jump, but also so was the cost associated with it. And then for them to say Zen 5, when you have this history of these huge jumps in performance, for it to be like single digit at best in some tests was like a huge flop because the amount of marketing that they put into it was saying that this was going to be just like revolutionary for AMD. Yes, they made huge improvements in efficiency. You're talking to gamers here. The huge majority of gamers are not going to care that they are getting 9% more performance at 60% of the power. Gamers don't give a crap, I promise you. And that's who they were marketing to. So yes, they have their place and they've made their improvements, which is fine. But at the end of the day, it was oversold in terms of the promises that people were expecting. So now we'll talk about Intel. With the market just completely dominated, for the most part, by Intel CPUs still to this day, a huge hit to trust. And that is the number one way to kill your brand, especially amongst PC gamers and enthusiasts, is breaking trust. So I can promise you right now, there's a lot of people that may have been interested in Arrow Lake that are not going to go out and buy Arrow Lake. And here's the other problem. Even as reviewers, we have new things to consider and look at when we're testing these CPUs. But if Intel isn't forthcoming and honest and open and fully transparent about what are the acceptable frequency ranges, what are the acceptable voltage ranges, what is the acceptable amount of leeway motherboard manufacturers have, we have no way of knowing if something is performing out of spec. Because here's the problem. I've put out 3 or 4 videos talking about motherboards taking too much control over the CPU and they're going to cause problems. And here's the thing, I didn't get a whole lot of credit for this. I don't really care, that's fine. But I blew the whistle like 4 times saying, this is a problem. Going all the way back to like 2022. This is a problem. These motherboard settings are frying CPUs. They must be addressed. I pointed it out over and over and over. And I leaned on ASUS over and over and over. And ASUS every time wrote me saying I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. I feel a little vindicated, but I'm also a little saddened over the fact that that there was just an unwilling discussion to take place about whether or not motherboard manufacturers were truly pushing these chips too far. Guess what exists now in every single motherboard in the market for Intel's 13th and 14th gen and 12th gen? Intel failsafe limits that actually failsafe. Something I called out years ago, but it basically got called stupid because I was told it's not going to do anything more than the CPU wants. Bullshit. Then why the hell were your 65 watt parts pulling over 200? Moving on, trust is broken, not just with the CPU manufacturers, but the motherboard manufacturers too. So my point is, how do we know if Arrow Lake isn't gonna show up 2 years down the road with having the same kind of problems? Well, we have to hope Intel and the board partners have learned from not this mistake, but this just blatant fuck up. This isn't a mistake because it was brought to attention for years, not just by me, but other content creators were also saying this must be looked at. I called out my own CPU getting up to nearly 1.6 volts without me touching anything. So if Intel and the board partners have truly learned from this mistake, have they learned fast enough? Because Arrow Lake was definitely already developed and being manufactured while this was going on. And I'm shocked to even think about the fact that Arrow Lake is potentially launching sooner than it was supposed to, because the laptops for Arrow Lake have already been announced and talked about and all that sort of stuff, so we know desktops are right behind it. We might now be reporting in a couple months on Intel's biggest bomb of a launch of its history. So that's the current state of affairs when it comes to PC. It sucks because I love what I do. I love this genre. I love computer tech. I spend more time tinkering on computers and overclocking and tweaking settings than playing any game, because that's my game. But what do you do when when the overlords of the genre are just screwing up on every turn? You don't buy it, and that's what a lot of you are doing. But at some point, you have to, if you're going to continue having a computer passion. At some point, you're going to have to upgrade. Well, if you're like, I'm not buying anything, well, whatever you have now is not going to last forever. So what are you going to do then? And that's the conundrum that we're all in. So food for thought. I would love it if you guys would comment down below how you feel about each one of these points. So the three main points I talked about is that AMD is not going to be trying to compete against NVIDIA in the high-end arena for graphics cards, which sets a precedent for NVIDIA to just stranglehold pricing. 2, and what I really hope happens is that AMD can just flood the mid-range cards and truly be competitive at that price point to where NVIDIA has no choice but to also compete with price. 2, the AMD CPU dud of a launch for 9000 series. And 3, Arrow Lake launching at Intel's absolute worst reputation and stock value in recent history. And by recent history, I mean like the last 3 decades.